Okay, we might make a start of the session on this Tuesday, the 16th of February. So thanks very much, everybody, as always, for coming along to the training session today. Those of us joining through Zoom and also everybody watching on YouTube. You're very welcome to the session today, where in a slightly different kind of tack to what we have been doing the previous few weeks, we're going to look this week at not, I guess, kind of core Canvas or Zoom features, but maybe kind of approaches in terms of how one might be able to leverage tools in Canvas to help maybe create more effective design elements, to maybe structure content in a more kind of attractive way. And we're also going to talk kind of tangential to that at the whole area of open resources, open educational resources, but also, I suppose, more practical tools that may be available to you in terms of finding and using content and images and doing so in an ethical way. As well, also, I'm going to touch on effective slide design, which obviously is very personal kind of subject and everybody has their own approaches. But I am hoping to maybe just cover a couple of just broad kind of pointers in terms of designing slide decks and some kind of useful tools or useful approaches that might help with that process, or at a minimum, make it easier for staff. So to begin with, I'd like to talk a small bit just about kind of Canvas modules and visual design elements in those, and how we can maybe make use of the tools within Canvas to create kind of nice looking resources, nice looking pages, syllabuses, so on and so forth. So I'm going to run through these quite briefly. Obviously, the session is going to be recorded, so if I'm kind of moving too quickly or if I'm going through things quite quickly, please do feel free to look at our YouTube channel to kind of go back and cover any of these. So this is a list of kind of general points which are maybe worth bearing in mind when designing pages, syllabuses, resources, announcements within Canvas. I suppose it's kind of a long list in terms of these, because there's a number of different areas inside in Canvas where all of these different elements would be applicable. There's, for example, pages. If I want to create an announcement, all of the kind of same principles that I've listed here apply. The same being true of, for example, the syllabus, which is typically the landing page, or potentially, the the space, for example, inside an assignment for description, where I might put my brief or might kind of flag something to students. But for our purposes, I'm just going to create a new page to maybe talk about some of the items inside in this list. So the first item, if I go into pages and I create a new page, we'll just call this test page. So one of the first suggestions is to use the built-in styling formats. So any place where you're asked to kind of input text in this fashion, you'll usually see this kind of WYSIWYG bar or editor. It's something which is kind of familiar to us from, tools like Microsoft Word or similar. And this in Canvas is called the rich text editor. Much like in Word or in Google Docs or in similar kind of elements, Canvas has its own built-in kind of styles ready to go. So, for example, there is different heading settings, there is the paragraph, which is the standard text, and there is the pre-formatted kind of font as well. So one thing which we can do to hopefully make life relatively straightforward for us immediately is to be able to use these built-in tools as a way of kind of laying out our content. So if I have a heading for this particular page, what I might do is I might set that using heading 2, using the paragraph dropdown, which is here. And if I have a subheading for that, then I might use, again, going to the dropdown and using heading 3 or heading 4. The standard kind of text is available to me here. And this is usually set as some kind of sans serif font at 12 point. And I have all my various kind of styling kind of tools up here. If I go up to the format dropdown, excuse me as well, there's a number of different kind of, there's a number of additional tools which might not be immediately visible to me kind of here. So I can use this for superscript to subscript. I can access more headings, more kind of inline styles. I can align things left and right. If I want to, I can put in blocks. I can access different fonts, font sizes, align them left or right, change the direction, so on and so forth. And if at any stage it's turning into a mess for me, I can simply highlight all of this and I can go to heading and set this as paragraph, or I can go to format, go into clear formatting, and that will generally kind of reset everything as well. There's also under tools a word count feature available for me. So if I want to, I can check how many words I've typed, and that is also displayed for me as well down here. So as an immediate step, those kind of preset kind of headings can be very useful just as a way of adding a particular, of laying out a page. So if I know the content that I'm going to write at a minimum, I can immediately start using these kind of formats just as a way of laying out the page to essentially kind of signal to students, hey, this is a header, this is a subheader, so pay attention to this. Here's the kind of main body of text. One other suggestion which is recommended is to use white space. So Canvas, like most VLEs by default, and I guess kind of by necessity, can be quite busy because immediately over here to the left-hand side, there's the main menu, there's a module navigation menu here, there's the kind of header sections, there's all these options along the bottom, so on and so forth. So sometimes it can be no harm maybe to leave some unfilled, what we call negative space around the edges of the page. So there's a number of different ways of doing this. If I publish this automatically, that is added into Canvas Summit by default. But even then, we can still see that there are these additional buttons on top. And again, maybe it's never any harm to hop into student mode just to try and identify what it looks like from a student perspective. So maybe no harm if you're finding your pages becoming quite busy, to leave some unfilled negative space. Some immediate ways of doing that is at the top of the page to leave a paragraph space, and the same at the bottom of the page. An additional consideration as well is to maybe consider using quite a few paragraphs, more than you usually would if you were writing a Word or a PDF document. And again, the reason for that is that even within Word or PDF viewers, content is generally quite spaced out. Content is quite kind of aligned. There's not a huge amount of additional elements inside there. But inside in something like Canvas, we're always going to have the two menus over here. We're going to have items along the top and along the bottom. So it's maybe no harm to use more paragraphs than one usually would when writing, for example, a Word document, because the material which is going to show up here is going to show up in a different format. It's going to show up within the Canvas environment, so no harm to be aware of that. Another recommendation is to maybe use colors some way sparingly. The general recommendation is to use 2 to 3 colors and use them in a fairly consistent manner. So what you don't want essentially, I guess, is you don't want to kind of have, for example, a kind of a real kind of rainbow effect going on. You don't want kind of, to have something like this, because again, like we mentioned with the use of headers, with the use of subheaders, with the use of standard text, all of this is designed to offer some kind of signal to students that, okay, because this text is bigger, it warrants more attention. So this is the header, this is the main topic, this is the subtopic, this is the standard text. So the recommendation in terms of the use of colors is to maybe try and identify 2 to 3 colors. That's not obviously set in stone. You can use more or less colors if you want, but to maybe try and use them consistently. So for example, for my headers, if I want to kind of draw particular attention to it, I might use, for example, a blue color. Something to be aware of as well, just when we're talking about colors, is kind of if I add in a link into Canvas, by default, it adds a particular color, which hopefully you can see it here, is this kind of dark blue kind of color. So that is one color which is going to be automatically added. So you can maybe consider, for example, for a header, using something a little bit different. And I found myself that when Canvas adds a link, it just kind of adds that color, and it adds kind of, if you see when I move my mouse over it, it kind of shows up the underline. But I find myself that, there isn't a huge difference between the default kind of dark color in text and the kind of link color that Canvas adds in. So just a personal preference, what I tend to do is I might, when I have a link, I might make it bold, or I might underline it, or I might do something to it. Again, just to indicate that this is something some way different to the rest of the text. It's generally recommended as well, just for kind of accessibility purposes, excuse me, that when you're selecting colors, maybe try not to make your colors green or red. Try not to make that one of the 2 or 3 colors that you use, for the simple reason that some people who have visual impairments, they find those colors quite difficult to see. Another consideration when kind of designing things like pages, announcements, things like that, is to use the module links feature as appropriate. So my window is a small bit squished here, but the module links feature, basically, if I can just expand this slightly, if you see here over on the right hand side, there is the ability for me to add in particular links to Canvas. And if I click on that, there's an option for external links and there's an option for module links. Now, external links would be if I want to send someone to Google, if I want to send them to www.mtu.ie, so on and so forth. Module links, however, lets me stick in links to items within this module. So for example, if I'm putting out an announcement, or if I want to make this page, if I'm covering content in this page which is useful for a specific announcement or for a specific assignment, excuse me, I might say all of this is important with a view to, and what I might do then is I click on my module link feature, click on module links. It will bring in this kind of pop-up over on the right-hand side. And if you see here, all of the different sections for this particular assignment are made available to me. And if I select here, I might select assignments and I might say assessment 2. And what that does is it puts in a link directly to the assessment in question. So this is a very useful feature. If I just, and again, the way we do this is we click on the link option, we click on module links, and that brings up all of the links to the different areas of the module on the right-hand side. So this is particularly useful if I do want to kind of, signpost students to relevant areas of this module. So for instance, I might say this is essentially what we covered in, and I'm going to go to units and I'm going to say week 1. All of this is important with a view to this particular assignment. For more tips, check, and I'm going to go to announcements and I'm going to select this announcement. If I want to as well, I can also highlight text, and I can simply, when I have the text highlighted, I can bring up this this pop-up in the right-hand area, and any text I have highlighted, whatever I click on, it will put the link onto that text. So that's a very useful feature, just as a way of really kind of signposting students to important or relevant parts of the module, as a way of kind of just sending them to the information that they need to get to straight away. So the module links feature is something we would recommend lecturers use, just to kind of really make life easier for students, and ideally for yourselves as well. All of this is with the notion that if you're giving students the right information and signposting them to the right areas, they're not going to be sending you emails asking, additional questions, or you're not going to get the same question 10 times over. Another suggestion is to use related media as appropriate. So within Canvas, there's a number of different ways to add in additional material. So one option immediately is this image option up here. So inside, again, in a page, in a unit, in an announcement, in an assignment, in a discussion, anywhere where you see this rich text editor, what you can do is you can click on the image option up here, and that will allow me to upload an image, to use module image, or to use user images, which are images that I have myself in my own personal kind of file area. So I might stick in a image that I already have within my file area, and that is available immediately inserted then into the into this particular page. So the use of images inside in these kind of various areas is quite straightforward. Another feature which is available to me here is this media button. So what I can do if I click on this is it will allow me to upload or record media. So I'll come back to that in a second, but the uploading of media is very simply just that I would be able to upload a video file or an MP3 file to students, and that would be available to them. Another feature is the module media. So any media, any files, any videos, any audio that I've uploaded to the module or that I've uploaded to my own kind of file area. And just on that topic, the way that you can access that is if you go to your account and click into this files area, there's a personal file storage area for every staff member inside here. Now, another option which is available to me, as I said, is the ability to upload or record media. So if I select on that, then I can drag a file up here, or else if I click into the record area, what Canvas will do is it will ask me for permission to use my mic, use my webcam, and from here I can record a message directly to students. So for example, if I didn't feel like typing out a long message to students, I might simply record something for them to say, hello everyone, just a reminder that assessment 2 is due by the end of the month. If you're not sure about this, please feel free to get in touch with me, or else check unit 1 where we covered much of this material. And if I click finish, I can save it, and that is inserted directly into that area. So that can be useful for things like, for example, for announcements, for being able to send out video announcements to students. It might be, I guess the time is maybe slightly past, but for future semesters, it can be a useful feature just to offer kind of a video introduction to the module. For example, I might put that on my syllabus page, which is the kind of landing page for students coming into my module. It's just a nice way to kind of introduce in a more personal fashion the module, what we'll be covering in the module, who I am, so on and so forth. So that feature is available. And an additional feature, if it's not immediately available to you in the kind of set of icons presented here, if you click on the menu icon over here, you'll see that there is this kind of plug icon. Now, what that does is allows you to bring in additional apps, but one which should be available to you immediately is the YouTube feature. So if I click on this YouTube icon, what that will do is it will basically allow me to search YouTube from within Canvas. And I can simply select a particular video. I can embed it as small or medium or large by clicking on this arrow over on the right-hand side, or else I can grab the return link. But if I click embed, what that will do is it will simply insert a YouTube video into this kind of page or unit or announcement as appropriate. So there's any number of ways to add in kind of media from YouTube, from kind of by uploading files or by recording something yourself. An additional consideration then, just in terms of the use of text in these different kind of areas of Canvas, is to maybe consider using a larger font size by default. So, you know, the default text size, which is used for the kind of paragraph format inside in Canvas, is 12. It's usually fine, but given that students might also be viewing this on their phone, given that some students might have some visual impairments, you might consider maybe when you're creating this, just moving that up to something like 14 or 16, just to make it a little bit easier for people to see it and to kind of just, spare people's eyes having to read that kind of smaller text. Another consideration, maybe avoid using too much text. So that particularly kind of given the amount of kind of media resources which are available in terms of the ability to use YouTube, the ability to record my own audio or video, and just given the fact, again, that kind of, you know, students, the same as lecturers, are quite busy, that there might be, might be looking at these different kind of areas on their phone as opposed to on a computer screen, maybe considering, if possible, trying to move away from too much text. And again, even the module link feature is a useful way of doing this. So I don't need to explain to students where they need to go. I can just say, for more, go see, and again, put in a module link and put in, let's say I put in a link there to the week 1 module. Instead of trying to type out a long paragraph, kind of trying to explain something, I might, for instance, record a video message instead of typing everything out. And again, this serves the purpose of just making everything a little bit more available, a little bit more accessible, both in terms of the information, but also in terms of thinking about learners who might have visual impairments, who might have, similar kind of issues. You know, all of this just kind of goes to make the whole thing a little bit quicker to get and a little bit easier to get for them. An additional consideration then is maybe just kind of group related items. So consider putting kind of additional or kind of relevant information kind of close together inside these kind of areas in Canvas. And one kind of hack that I use myself is if I want to, for example, really kind of highlight something to students. So if I have a very important point that I want to make to them, or a key term, or let's say even I want to put some kind of title to this page in terms of design perspective, one tool which I use and which I find quite useful is the table. So what I basically do, just as a way of differentiating a particular section from the rest of the page, what I might do is I might go to table option, to the table option up here. I'm going to select table, and I'm just going to put in one cell. And when I put in this one cell, you'll see this table option kind of feature appears down here, which lets me add in additional rows or additional columns. But if we click on the first one, on table properties, and I go to advanced, what I can do is I can maybe select a border style. So I'm going to make a dashed border. I'm going to set the border color to be purple, and I'm going to set the background color to be a slightly lighter purple. And when I click save, this kind of creates this section for color, and I can again kind of add in kind of relevant text or information into this area just to differentiate it from the rest of the module. So I might say important point, and I'm going to make that a heading 3. I'm going to make it white. I'm going to make it bold, so on and so forth. And again, all of this serves to kind of highlight the information inside in this particular one cell table, just to make it a little bit more visible, a little bit more immediate for students. So that's a real kind of whirlwind tour of different kind of design considerations inside in Canvas. And again, all of what I covered there is relevant to pages. It's relevant to if you're creating an announcement, if you're creating a discussion, if you're adding in a brief to an assignment, for your syllabus page, so on and so forth. So what I'd like to talk briefly now is on the process of ethically sourcing and using content. So there's, I suppose, generally with this, with this area, it really is just more of a common sense issue and kind of, to a certain degree, a bit of an ethical issue as opposed to anything else. The golden rule, I guess, here is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. When you are considering using somebody else's media, it's important maybe just to think about the suitability for purpose, the context in which it's being used, the format in which it's being used, and then elements like licensing issues. Are you okay to use it? Are you okay to modify it? Other restrictions. Generally, one of the advantages, I guess, which we all have, is that we are working in education. So that does give us a certain amount of leeway or a certain amount of good faith in terms of using images, but it is, or other people's material, but it is important nonetheless to be aware of considerations related to this. And I suppose to try, ideally ourselves, to strive to try and be as ethical and as, I suppose, clear conscienced as possible in using other people's media. So one consideration, or one term which I'm sure everybody familiar with, is the whole area of intellectual property rights. Very much just the notion that because you've developed something, you have a certain amount of legal rights to it. And the whole area of IPR is designed to avoid exploitation and ensure the creator of the work has some degree of control over how it's used. So generally, factors included are things like who creates it, who links to it, and who hosts it. Just continuing in the vein of a couple of key terms to be aware of. Copyright, I'm sure we're all familiar with, is essentially just a set of rights that protects one's individual ownership of property, and the owner of copyright can display the work, they can reproduce the work, they can provide additional kind of versions of the work. And it is, if something is under copyright, it is to the creator's kind of decision as to how available or unavailable it is. Generally, if something is under copyright, it is not as immediately usable, reusable, or available as, for example, things like public domain and copy free. Public domain is basically material which is no longer under copyright. So with public domain material, there's no permission required for use or context or commentary, and it can be used for public, private, or commercial work. Public domain work generally refers to material which was made available for the benefit of the public, or else it's material which was under copyright, but the copyright for it expired. So a lot of public domain material very often might refer to material which has been available for some time, or which, you know, the creation of it goes back quite a few decades, and it's available now because I suppose the copyright on it expired, for lack of a better term. Copy free then is a form of kind of licensing agreement which has no restrictions on use, distribution, modification, or benefit. So essentially it's material which is available to all to be used as one may wish. Copyleft then removes restrictions on distributing and modifying. And probably the most common or the most popular instance of copyleft licenses refer to Creative Commons. And Creative Commons is essentially just a set of licenses that, as identified there, allows for the redistribution of copyrighted work under specific conditions. So when we talk about Creative Commons licenses, it is material that is allowed to be used by others, but under, as is identified there, specific conditions. And elements which go into a Creative Commons license can include attribution, where you can use this work, but you have to identify who came up with it or who developed it day one. Non-commercial work, so it can be used, but it cannot be used for commercial purposes. No derivative work, which essentially means that it can be used, but you can't alter it in any way. You can't adjust it in any way to fit your own purposes. And share alike, whereby you are able to use this kind of work in any way you see fit, but you are obligated then to share, your own iteration of this media, your own iteration of this work in a similar vein. So generally, if you do want to use something which is available under a Creative Commons license, the critical elements are that you abide by the terms of the license. So there's any number of combinations of Creative Commons licenses. For example, if we look down here in the bottom left corner, you can see this is a CC license, which identifies that you have to give, there's the by, so you have to give attribution, you have to identify who it came from. The no commercial, so it cannot be used for commercial purposes. And the share alike, so that any use of it, which I do, I have to make my own material available in a similar way. So the abiding by the terms of the Creative Commons license refers to that if something is made available under an attribution, no commercial work, you have to give attribution. You can't use it for commercial purposes. And a broader point then is to simply give credit, to identify who developed that work day one. And what is most typically done as well is to identify where it came from. So this is a photo by this individual, and it's from their Flickr account. The reuse of content under fair use is relevant to lectures because broadly, with an education purpose, it doesn't really count as commercial use. So the non-commercial element really isn't a problem for us because the material is being used for educational purposes. And there is, in general, a certain amount of, like I said, goodwill or kind of leniency given to work which is used for educational purposes. Now, that doesn't mean you can go off and use whatever you want, however you want, but it is maybe something to be aware of, just in terms of if you are using something for educational purposes, it does have a certain, there's a certain leniency there in terms of how you use it. But generally, it is strongly recommended to engage with the kind of the spirit of Creative Commons licenses by, again, just abiding by the terms of the license, the appropriate terms and conditions, and giving credit wherever it may be used. So as I mentioned there, to give attribution to the source, to provide context or commentary for the material being used, and to use only the relevant parts of the material instead of using it in its entirety as appropriate. So a couple of resources available just in terms of Creative Commons material. We can make these available in another format as well, but just a couple of websites that we use ourselves. There's any number of them out there. For, I suppose, our purposes, we've mainly focused on kind of image kind of websites and a couple of educational websites. Pexels is a a resource for stock photos and videos. Flickr Commons is kind of developed by, it involves a lot of kind of participating institutions as is identified here, and it provides kind of a lot of different kind of photo archives, but it also was a very large amateur photography community who provide material to Flickr Commons. So it's maybe not as professional as some of the stock photographs or videos on sites like Pexels, but there is generally kind of a very broad range of photos up there because it's provided by amateur photographers or videographers all over the world, in addition to these kind of participating institutions. Pixabay is similar to Pexels. It's kind of stock imagery, which is made available under a royalty-free license. And Creative Commons Search. So Creative Commons Search itself also provides a wide range of different kind of content, in particular images, which can be used under, which obviously is made available under specific Creative Commons licenses. And one, excuse me, useful feature immediately in the Creative Commons license or in the Creative Commons search is it gives you these immediate filters, which is quite useful in that, okay, I want to use something, but I'm going to have to adapt it for my own purposes, or I want to use something in a commercial context. Wikimedia Commons, kind of similar to Wikipedia again, is an additional resource which makes available a wide range of different kind of media which can be used under CC licenses. And this is called the Noun Project. And the Noun Project is slightly different in that it's not kind of imagery or photography, it's kind of icons which can be used for free under specific Creative Commons licenses. So there's a number of different resources. Those are obviously only some resources which are available. There's any number of kind of resources which provide similar kind of functionality out there and available. So I'm just going to very briefly touch on effective slide design. I'm sure these are all guidelines that you would have heard before in some context or another, but it's maybe no harm. I mean, certainly kind of most of us use slides at least to some capacity in our teaching. So just a couple of kind of general guidelines in terms of designing maybe more effective slides. And very often this doesn't mean, you know, having to go back and having to redevelop all of the slides which you have. It might just mean splitting slides, splitting your presentations into more slides so that kind of there's less on screen at any given time, maybe applying some general kind of formatting principles, so on and so forth. But a couple of general points in terms of effective slide design is very broadly acknowledged that less is more when it comes to slides, and that slides ideally should be some form of visual aid as opposed to kind of spelling everything out for students. So ideally you should use slides as visual cues and avoid kind of too much text on screen, and also this notion of death by bullet points. So having a huge volume of bullet points and text on screen as opposed to using it as a visual cue as something to kind of talk over. Generally with slide design, it's recommended to use a maximum of 3 typefaces. There's any number of online font sources available to you out there. One consideration as well is I'm very partial to using Google Slides myself, because Google comes with a huge array of different kind of templates available and a huge array of different fonts which are immediately available to use. Just a small point on Google Slides as well, you can import existing PowerPoints into Google Slides, which lets you kind of take what you've already developed in PowerPoint and kind of adapt or adjust those as required. Generally, in terms of using color, the main use of color in a presentation is to draw attention. So you should really try and use kind of a set, similar to what we mentioned when we were talking about Canvas, maybe 3 to 4 kind of colors. And you ideally should be using those colors in a particular way to draw attention as appropriate. When you're using images in a presentation, you should ideally frame them effectively. One consideration is to maybe think in terms of a full screen, which can help kind of you in kind of designing material, but also in presenting particular images in a certain way. And maybe think, if you are using images across a variety of different kind of slide layouts, think about using them in a complementary way. So you could use an image in a full screen capacity, you could use it in a half screen capacity, you could use it in kind of a smaller capacity. But the important thing is to maybe try and be consistent in how you use these images. And generally, even kind of from those 3 slides there, you know, those are 3 different layouts, but they do add a certain consistency in terms of design and presentation. One consideration is potentially to maybe augment your presentations. You could do this, and again, this is something which Google Slides has a lot of tools for built in, but you can use you know, additional kind of apps or additional kind of polling tools as a way of making your presentations more interactive by including slides which kind of tell people to fill in a poll to complete a certain activity. Google Slides provides some of these features as appropriate. You can use Google Forms as a way of kind of offering a quiz. Excuse me. You can use Socrative as an additional tool to supplement your presentations, and you can use Kahoot as well, which is a slightly more fun, slightly more competitive way of engaging students in kind of a quiz. You can also obviously use Zoom as well by offering a poll. But I guess the general good rule of thumb is if you're using these, maybe just include a slide to kind of point students to the relevant tool or to the relevant element, or to highlight to them that we're now going to do a quiz or we're now going to do an activity. And again, this is just, I guess it just helps make the process a little more consistent for users, in that kind of the presentation is being tied into the activity you're getting them to undertake. And what I'm going to briefly cover now at the end, and I'll let you go within the next 4 to 5 minutes, is to look at some open education resources and to look at one in particular, Canvas Commons. So OERs refer to open education repositories, and are sometimes also known as open education resources. But OERs are teaching and learning materials that you can freely use and reuse without charge. So immediately there's any number of OERs, which I'm sure ye would be familiar with to begin with, in terms of higher education. And these would be things like peer-reviewed textbooks and journals, subject-specific media, assessment activities, courses, software, so on and so forth. Now, there's a couple of different websites out there which are OERs specifically designed for kind of higher education. Some of these include OER Commons, include Wiki Educator. UNESCO offered this kind of UNESCO Doc digital library, and even YouTube could be considered as a form of OER. So OER for higher education, excuse me, generally offers access to reusable learning objects, which you can take and you can usually use within your own context. These might be documents, they might be video, they might be assessment activities, PDFs. They might also be full courses, which are typically made available in what's known as a SCORM format, which can be introduced and plugged directly into your existing course. But one thing to consider just in terms of Canvas and OERs is that Canvas has its own kind of built-in OER system, which is called Commons. And if we go into Canvas and we click on the left-hand menu here in this area, Commons, this will then bring us to Canvas Commons, where various kind of learning objects, 180,000 in total, are made available to us, and which we can kind of immediately begin using directly within our course. So one of the key features here is that we can search by the name of the institution that it came from, the name of the resource in question, any kind of tags which they would have. We can organize it by the most relevant, the most favorited, the most downloaded, so on and so forth. So let's just say if we take this course, which looks at developing in Swift data collections, or maybe this one actually for safeguarding hand washing education, all I need to do is I need to go into the Commons area. I simply click on this particular module, and then I have a number of different options available to me. Excuse me. So I can see here what the name of it is. I can get a preview of it here, which lists what this particular module consists of. So there's one module, there's 6 pages, there's 27 files, and under details, there's kind of usually a description from the author. It identifies the grade level. These are usually in American kind of, in an American context, so it's maybe important to be aware of that. And I can see the tags that are available as well as version notes, which just indicates, okay, there was an update to it on the 15th of October, which was a spelling correction, so on and so forth. Over on the right-hand side then, I can see there's a number of options in terms of importing it or downloading it, adding it to favorites, or copying the resource link. There's also some information up here in terms of how many people have favorited it, how many downloads it's had, when it was created, and more importantly, if it's copyrighted or not. So if I want to, I can click import download. And what that will do is it will basically let me identify a particular Canvas course that one of my particular modules, excuse me, one of my modules in Canvas. And if I want to, I can either download it onto my own machine, or I can import it into that particular course. And what that will do is it will basically pull all of that material which is available in this kind of learning object, and it will bring it into the particular Canvas course that I was looking at. Another thing which I can do if I so wish is, let's say if I just want to browse through Commons and try and find a few things that are useful to me, what I can do is I can click here on Add to Favorites. And if I go back into my dashboard and go back into my course, I can see inside here that that has imported. We can see here it's Safeguard Hand Washing Education. So that is available for me to use inside in my module immediately. But if I wanted to, I could also, let's say, go over to the files area. Or actually, sorry, what I'll do, which is more applicable, is I'm going to go into the page area. I'm going to click into a particular page. And what I can do inside this area here is I can, if I want to share a particular page to Commons, if I want to click into the edit area, what I can do as well is I can click into the description. And if I click into the image area, I can click under module images. And if I want to, I can upload any kind of Commons resource, which I've identified, into this area, or I can pull it in from the Commons favorite area. So if I go into the units area, excuse me, actually what we'll do, because time is a wasting, is go back into the Commons area. And I might just briefly point out as well, one feature which is available inside in Commons is also the ability, if I click on this filter option here, is to identify all these different resources which are available and the different kind of grade levels. But also at the base, there is the option to identify material which has been shared with everybody, or material that has just been shared internally in the Cork Institute of Technology, which should of course now read MTU, but that's something will change over time. So if I go into the filter area and I select that, that means that what will be presented to me is just material which has been shared internally inside in MTU Cork. So this is, for example, is something which I uploaded earlier and which I can click into, and then I can import or make available as I wish inside in this area. So if you did have material which you wanted to share, but only share with the rest of MTU Cork, the way that you can do that is simply, for example, if I go up to my account area and I go into my files area, what I can do is I can upload something. So I will just grab this PDF. And when this is uploaded, what I can do is I can click on the menu item over on the right-hand side here, and I can click Share to Commons. And that will give me a number of different options then in terms of how I want to share it. So who can view it? I'm going to select all of Cork Institute of Technology, but only people within the Cork Institute of Technology. I can decide if it is featured content, which essentially just means it's promoted, what license I want it to be available under. We can see there either as a public domain or all of our Creative Commons licenses. And I can give it a title, a description, tags. I can identify the image, and I can identify the grade level. Now, unfortunately, that is limited to the American context, but it is still kind of available to me in that way. Alternatively, if I, let's say, in my own time, put together a useful course that I wanted to share with CIT or with MTU Cork, or I wanted to make, put together a certain set of modules that will be relevant for any MTU Cork course, what I can do is I can put my course together, and then I can simply click on, if I go into the settings area, then there is an option for me to share to Commons. And what that will do is, instead of sharing a file, it will share my entire course inside into the Canvas Commons area. And again, I can decide if I want to make that available to everybody using Canvas across the world, or if I wanted to make it available just to others inside in MTU Cork. And if I just briefly jump back to the home page, a final element as well is this option here to import from Commons. So if I was in my module and I did want to bring in a particular course or a particular set of material from Commons, I can click on that option, and that will bring up this page where I can simply search for and bring in material from Creative Commons.